All right. Good evening, everybody. We're back with the imagination essay. It's winding down. Jason hasn't been able, for various reasons, to be with us all the time. So we're going to kind of go back a little bit and talk about some things that we may have talked about last time, but Jason wasn't there. So, and I'd like to get his thoughts on it. And it's a rich enough text that we can we can actually do this and still get something else out of it. So.
Yeah.
Um,
All right. Well, yeah, I mean, I liked last time I did like how you guys got into, you read through the part about, where George was making the distinction between, kind of between the imagination and fancy and where it can go wrong and kind of the cautions to take with that and stuff. So I like that all that was best thing.
yeah.
Um, yeah, but the line that we mentioned right before we started this that I liked was, and we can go back before this, too, if we want to, but I like the line where it said the highest imagination and the lowest common sense are always on one side. I don't know. I have that highlighted. I just and to me, I mean, I don't know if this is the right way to think about it, but to me, that just kind of means, um, like the highest, loftiest things I can think about usually end up being the simplest in some way. Hey, Lance, you should hop in here. But
Yeah, you should.
yeah, it's just kind of I feel like based on my experience, that usually ends up happening. These high and lofty ideas or these things that I think are really profound, I usually find end up being incredibly simple when they're
Yeah,
true,
yeah,
something like that.
totally. Like I find myself constantly referring to these old cliches like, gotta make hay when the sun shines or, um,
Yeah,
things like
yeah,
that, right?
yeah,
And those are like commonsensical things. But they're also like because I've had that experience when we started living off the land in Telegraph Creek. I had the experience of these metaphors. Cliches are dead metaphors, right? Essentially. And um and they started coming back to life. And it felt like my imagination was being um I don't know, resurrected at the same time, you know?
yeah. That's cool.
Yeah,
We should
because
go
you're
through some of those.
literally because you're literally making hay while the sun shines, right? And it's usually like frickin' hot and you're out there sweating your ass off and you're covered in grass seed, right? Because you're raking in this stuff. I
Yeah,
never we never hayed on our own land, but I helped other farmers haying, and in Switzerland, I did a little thing once with a local farmer, and they have these huge rakes, and so when the tractor goes through, it kind of leaves a little bit of hay on the side, and you have to rake that all in. And so you're walking around out there in the glaring sun because you literally are dependent on the sun to dry that hay. So you do make hay when the sun shines, right?
yeah,
Like, and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
and it's
yeah,
and it's hot and you're
yeah,
sweating and it's all sticking to you, and you're you're dragging this thing around. Yeah. So anyway, that this dead metaphor just suddenly comes to life, and you get more of a sense of what it sounds. What's the word? Petty. It sounds kind of, I don't know, but there's a lot more to it when you're doing it. You know what I mean?
yeah.
There's all the other stuff, right, that you don't know until you start doing it. So, yeah.
I was just looking up some more. I've typed in cliche metaphors just to see what came up. But there's bite the bullet, turn a blind eye, paint the town red, by
Mhm.
and large, give the cold shoulder, life is a journey, love is a battlefield, laughter is the best medicine. I don't know. There is something like you said. I've experienced that before too, where yeah, where they just start to come alive again. And I think it's kind of going back to it. the beginning of the essay, I think, where George MacDonald was saying, like, just over time, the prolonged use of a word just kind of, and it loses its wings, and it just becomes this, like you said, dead metaphor or something like that.
I
But then
also
after a
think that,
while,
yeah, and I
yeah,
also think that it's very possibly the case that because you're not living any of those things anymore, right?
mm, yeah,
Like for example, laughter is the best medicine. I remember, I think it was Chad talking about how, you know, in an AA meeting with a bunch of, alcoholics who have just been through the mill. Some of them are still in it, you know. They can actually sit around and laugh with each other about their failings, and sometimes those things are very tragic, but there's a laughter that goes with it that only they can share, okay?
yeah,
People outside of that circle who haven't experienced those things can't laugh at it. It's not funny to them, okay?
mhm.
And I've had that experience, in a psych ward, sitting around with a bunch of, people who just tried to kill themselves. And we're telling our stories and laughing at our stupidity, you know?
Yeah,
And then all the nurses are standing around scratching their heads, and they're getting upset because we're laughing so hard. They can't, but it's medicine. It's
yeah, yeah,
absolutely medicine. It is, it's
yeah,
healing, right? And so, like, if you don't have the life experience, um, if you've never laughed for healing, if you've never had that experience, you don't know what that means, right? And that's why it's dead, because it's not being lived out, I think.
mhm.
That's why making hay when the sun shines is a dead metaphor for most people. Who does that anymore? Who makes hay,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I guess the way you make it too is all has a different, could convey different meaning too, um,
Mhm.
or just the way you do work, even because like my friend Craig and I were talking a while back, and we were, gosh, I was somehow we were talking about mowing the yard, and I think he was asking me how it's somehow it came up how it's normally associated with like the man's job or things like that, and I was like, well, if you
Right.
really think about it, you go to ancient days, you're taking out a like basically a sword and just hacking this thing down. He's like, yeah, you're kind of making war on the grass. And I was like, good, I guess. But like now you just get on a riding mower with your beer or something and just cruise along. But like so like this past weekend I had to weed eat. And so I like took a little video and sent it to him. I was like, I'm making war on the grass right now. I was like cutting it down.
Perfect.
But I'm like, but I mean that imagery I think lost because in the scriptures, I read that and it talks about people like in when like just people getting cut down in like war and they're cut down like grass. Like people are just
Mhm,
cut down
mhm,
like grass,
mhm.
just mowed over. And like we'll use terms like that too. We'll mow over this or something like that. But then yeah, it's just lost, I think, because
Right.
we've distance ourselves so far from it. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was
That's a
good.
good point. I never really, I kind of glanced over that highest imagination, lowliest common sense. That's good. I'm glad you had another look at
Well,
it.
thanks. Well, thanks. So is this where you left off, or you've read this? We're
We
going to
read
read
this,
it again,
but
right?
let's read it again. I'll read just
Okay.
this short paragraph, and then maybe we can talk about it, because
Okay.
there's a lot there. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the harmony thing. For the end of imagination is harmony. A right imagination, being the reflex of the creation, will fall in with the divine order of things as the highest form of its own operation. Quote, will tune its instrument here at the door, unquote, to the divine harmonies within. That should speak to you a little bit, Mr. Mr. Banjo player. Will be content alone with growth towards the divine idea, which includes all that is beautiful in the imperfect imaginations of men. Will know that every deviation from that growth is downward, and will therefore send the man forth from its loftiest representations to do the commonest duty of the most wearisome calling in a hearty and hopeful spirit. This is the work of the right imagination, and towards this work every imagination, in proportion to the rightness that is in it, will tend. The reveries even of the wise man will make him stronger for his work. His dreaming as well as his thinking will render him sorry for past failure and hopeful of future success. Oh, look at that. Lukey's here. Cool. Are you feeling a little happy, Lukey?
I am delighted.
Very nice.
That's so funny. So glad you're here, man.
Yeah,
Oh,
me too.
happy to be
We're going over the paragraph for the end of imagination is harmony again, just because there's so much in there. I wanted to say this before I forget, because I forget very easily. When he says, will be content alone with growth towards the divine idea, which includes all that is beautiful in the imperfect imaginations of men, will know that every deviation from that growth is downward, and will therefore send the man forth from its loftiest representations to do the commonest duty. That's that sentence that we just looked at, Jason, of the most wearisome calling in a hearty and hopeful spirit. And that sentence also reminds me of in Phantastes when Anodos goes out and heads in a southerly direction. Remember? He goes down.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then he says, the reveries even of the wise man will make him stronger for his work. His dreaming as well as his thinking will render him sorry for past failure and hopeful of future success. That sentence reminds me of the whole poem, The Hidden Life, that I read. You know, where he's out there laboring in the fields and his labor becomes an opportunity for him to mull over all the things he's reading in his books in the evenings or whatever, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And then you know, he finds repentance in those moments and hope for his future, you know, and sees the world as a, well, from that place of humility and gratitude, so to speak. So yeah.
Here,
You
I
got
think
any?
this might be. Oh, this
I
might
just
be related.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jason. I'm really anxious to know if you had any thoughts about the divine harmony as, you know, a musician and tuning your instrument at the door and stuff.
My banjo's always out of tune, so you know. What can I say? Oh, I mean, I really liked. Yeah, I liked it that he's describing it that way. I feel like there's a lot there that I probably I'm not really even qualified to talk about. I feel like my sister honestly would know more of that. She's a violinist and she played since she was 4, taking school of violin. But the way she'll play, like even when we record and stuff, she'll play over top of herself and everything, and she'll record one track and then play again, and it'll just immediately she's playing different notes, you know, and it's not all the same thing, and they're little accent notes to each one. They build on top of each other, and so you just listen back, and it's just her doing it. It sounds like an orchestra is playing like
Wow.
all together, and they're all, yeah, and she's not even playing the same note either. Is what's fascinating. It's like one note is different from another, but it's just there to yeah, to just accent and accentuate like the original melody or something like that. Yeah, and I'm not very good at doing that, but
well, you
she
can
is.
hopefully you can tune your instrument.
Yeah, not by ear though. I have a tuner on me. Like, I don't know. Oh, I actually am getting a little better at tuning it by ear, but I wouldn't trust myself to do that.
Hi, Lance.
Hey, Lance.
Hey, guys.
Hi, Lance.
Hey. But I did have something there. It's actually from Phantastes that was reminding me when you were reading through that. It says, it was talking about the imperfect imaginations of men, and then it says, and will therefore send the man forth from its loftiest representations to do the commonest duty of the most wearisome calling in a hearty and hopeful spirit. So kind of, I don't know, it just reminded me of, I think it's the part in Phantastes where he gets locked in the tower and that little girl sets him free and he finds himself humbled And so he's
Mhm.
I'll just read it and we'll see. It says, then first I knew the delight of being lowly, of saying to myself, I am what I am, nothing more. I have failed, I said. I have lost myself. Would it had been my shadow. I looked round. The shadow was nowhere to be seen. Ere long I learned that it was not myself, but only my shadow that I'd lost. I learned that it is better, a thousandfold, for a proud man to fall and be humbled, than to hold up his head in his pride and fancied innocence. I learned that he that will be a hero will barely be a man, that he will be nothing but a doer of his work, is sure in his manhood. In nothing was my ideal lowered or dimmed or grown less precious. I only saw it too plainly to set myself for a moment beside it. Indeed, my ideal soon became my life, whereas formerly my life had consisted in a vain attempt to behold, if not my ideal in myself, at least myself in my ideal. Now, however, I took, at first, what perhaps was mistaken pleasure in despising and degrading myself. Another self seemed to arise, like spirit from a dead man, from a dumb and trampled self of the past. Doubtless this self must die and be buried, and again from its tomb spring a winged child, but of this history as yet bears not the record. My history as yet bears not the record. Self will come to life even by the slaying of self, but there is ever something deeper and stronger than it, which will emerge at last from the unknown abysses of the soul. Will it be a sullen gloom burning with eyes, or a clear morning after the rain, or a smiling child that finds itself nowhere and everywhere? But I just like the part where he says, my ideal was not diminished. I only saw it too plainly. And then he says, I learned that he that will be a hero will barely be a man, and that he will be nothing but a doer of his work, is sure of his manhood.
Mm.
Because it kind of reminded me of that, where he's talking about doing the commonest duty.
Yeah,
In a way,
when you're talking about the ideal there, there's a section in the essay where he says, the imagination seeking the ideal in everything will elevate them to their true and noble service. So even the meanest tasks, right, will become noble, right?
Mhm.
yeah,
Because that's what the imagination does. That's what it does. It seeks the ideal in everything.
What does this have to do with this idea of harmony? Because when I think of harmony, I'm thinking of resonance, because there's something that, at least with the imagination, that doesn't necessarily, it's not a flight of fancy. It is an actual, almost like penetration into a deeper connection with the real, a deeper connection with what is in front of you at this very, like, almost elementary perceptual level, like this. I wonder if that's what is meant with harmony, is like this.
Yeah, I think so. Like he says,
the cards that you are dealt are actually the cards that are going to reveal that depth to you, and you think it's going to come from like somebody else's hand, and it's like, no, it's right there in the cards.
Yeah, exactly. Like it says here, at the beginning of that paragraph about harmony, it says a right imagination being the reflex of the creation. It's a reflex, okay? Will fall in with the divine order of things as the highest form of its own operation. It will fall in with the divine order of things. That's exactly what you were trying to get at, I think,
Yes.
Luke.
Yeah. Collapses in.
Yeah, and I think that ties in because I was thinking about the resonance too. So when you guys first started talking, and like we can have all these abstract ideas, and that's awesome, but it's when like you talk about the simple or the noblest things, and you were talking about cliches, like when I resonate with something, it's something that I know. And it's small and it's present and it's in me and it's around me and it's connecting me with things, you know, so that like that, so that harmony are those things. And you know, that's it's simple.
Yes.
It's simple. And so so the imagination in its truest sense, it's like when it's talking about falling into order or with or with God, you know, I think about we have those moments where when things are pure, they're simple. Like if you've ever just watched your child just giggle while they're swinging on a beautiful spring day, like that is just simple. But that's the universe. It's like everything. And like, you know, stuff doesn't exist around you. You're just, you know, you're there. And I think we have those moments in the imagination, or like, you know, you're talking about imaging forth. Like I have all this imaging forth out of Genesis stuff in this imagination. And like Sherry, you've mentioned that too. But like when you read that, Jason, I really, I think it just puts us in touch with the true and those things that are that. So the difference between fantasy or abstraction, like sometimes we get an abstraction, is that to me, the people that take me into their imaginations, like I just watched this film called The Way Back with Ben Affleck. But anyway, it's about a guy with alcoholism or whatever. I was bawling. I was just bawling because I've been where he's at.
Mm.
I've felt those feelings. I've made that failure. I've had to look someone in the eyes and ask for that grace that he was asking for in this movie. And so I was there and I was just moved. I mean, not just crying, I was bawling.
Well, that's what Desmond, he quotes Rene Thom, this mathematician, who I know very little about, but I guess he's the founder of systems theory. And, you know, he says there are things like he's talking about the limit of our rationality, and you know, we reach the limit of our rationality, and then we're in a place where we can only know things by empathically resonating with it, right? And that's what you're talking about there. And he uses the French verb to know. There's, I don't know what the other one is. Savoir and connaître. Those are the two French verbs to know something. Savoir is an accumulation of knowledge. Je sais, I know, right? I know it's raining. But when you're talking about a person, you say, what is it? My French. Je connais Luc, for example. I know Luc, right? That verb, connaître, means to be born with.
Whoa.
Okay. Because it comes from an ancient culture of little villages and growing up with people, and so it denotes a familiarity that has seriously just, you know, it started with your birth, right? I was born with these people. These are my people, right? I'm born. So to know something like that, to empathically resonate with it, is to be born with it.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah.
So I've got another little anecdote. We've got on Resonance, we've got train tracks that are like 3 blocks away from us. And when certain size trains go by, it shakes our entire house, but it's not like a earthquake type of shake. It's a resonance. And like, I was reading theories online because this is a phenomenon that occurs in a variety of places around the world where people live by train tracks. They get this resonance in their home, and it's super subtle, but like truly it's this, depending on the size of the train too, there's a different kind of like resonance. And this is what they're saying is like the actual like architecture of the house itself is like completely fine. It's stable. I mean, it's old, but it's a resonance that's occurring with the train tracks and the house itself. It's not like a shaking that's occurring. I don't know how to explain it. It's like corresponding with I don't know. I was trying to use this as a metaphor for resonance, but I'm
Like vibration? Is that what
Yeah,
you're thinking?
yeah,
vibrations. That's
like
exactly what I was thinking, Sherry. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
You
this
know, like
vibration
Desmond
that's
talks about that,
occurring in
you
the
know,
tracks is
when you
occurring inside the house.
Like the
right.
house is in harmony with the tracks, with the
Yeah,
vibrations of the tracks. That's insane.
exactly.
That's crazy. I used
And
to
that's
live.
what
The house I
that's what
had
harmony
was
actually creates. I think, Luke, maybe that's what you're subconsciously harmony creates vibration. So, you know, like you can do harmonics on a guitar, you know. Whoops. You must have heard that, Luke. I mean, Jason, you know, when people are tuning their guitar and they're doing that ding ding ding, you know, and
Mhm.
they're not listening for the individual strings, they're listening for the in between, the vibration that's created,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
From
that's
the
how I learned.
harmony.
That's how I learned
Yeah.
to tune because you can hear it. Boom, 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 and
Right.
you'll
You
hear
hear
it.
and if you know, I'm actually really good at tuning by ear, my guitar. Way better at it than if I use it. I hate using a tuner because I'm just like, no, I have to hear that. You know, it has to come into this you know, thing, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, there it is. There it is. You know? So yeah, and that's it's a vibration. Harmonics are that's how they work. They vibrate in a certain way. Oh,
Well,
kitty.
what are there are like 7,
Yes.
like they're called the
What do you feel?
I'm right, we're like the spiritual frequencies. So like if you hear Gregorian chants, actually the Byzantine chant, but what you'll do with the ohms or whatever, like there are these things that, and so when you really hear a really good Byzantine chant in these liturgies, and then underneath it they do that someone might be chanting, but they have that frequency going there. Like
Mhm.
they figured out like, hey, no, this is like taking us to heaven.
Well, that's
These-
because then you're actually feeling the vibration, right?
Mhm.
I know, I mean, I've never been, but yeah, my son does makes electronic music, right? And so for the person who loves electronic music, the bass is the most important thing because it needs to actually vibrate you inside, right? So yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot to it.
And
Yeah.
remember the obsession that we had for like a couple weeks with Aeolian harps? The
Yep.
wind,
That was cool.
the wind that actually plays harps, and it's like this beautiful. There's a few incredible like albums that are out there of just Aeolian harps, and
Yeah.
the wind is just naturally playing these things on
Did you-
mountains.
That's so cool.
Did you catch the interesting part about, you know, okay, so they compare the Aeolian harp with the siren in Greek mythology, right? So the sailors hear the siren, and they get taken out to places that are treacherous and their ships shipwreck and they die. Okay. Well, it's thought that that they were actually drying goat skins or something on the cliffs, and the wind, because the goat skin would get hard, right?
Yeah.
And the wind was vibrating them and causing these high-pitched sounds. And of course, because it was close to the cliffs, it was treacherous waters. And this is where the siren myth came from. Like it was, people were actually like drying hides, you know, on these sunny cliffs, right?
Hmm.
Isn't that interesting?
That's
Yeah.
cool.
I
Yeah.
shouldn't be laughing.
Well, Sherry, you were going to talk about that. Matthias talks about babies with moms and the vibrations.
Yeah, I've read that.
and-
I've read that to these guys before about how
Yeah.
our bodies are literally stringed instruments, right? Like that we're full of tendons, and that infants, when they're born, they have no concept of where their body ends and their mother's body begins. So they're all, you know, and they hear, even in the womb, the vibrations of her voice resonate on the child's body. And this is like true psychologically, and load the child with emotion. So if the mother is sad, let's say, the child actually feels her sadness. If she's happy, the child feels. So literally, or she is part of her entire being. And it's all through vibration and resonance.
That's why people should walk barefoot. That way you feel your mother, you're actually touching her again. That's just my opinion though, but I don't know, there's something special about it, I think.
Totally. And it will predispose people for later on in life. These initial resonances and vibrations and the loading of the child, right, through the mother. So it's kind of interesting. Should we read that next paragraph before we get too stuck?
Luke's here. We can get this thing out. Who wants to read?
I can. I'll just read this next one. To come now to the culture. I think that's where we are, eh? Yeah. Yep. To come now to the culture of the imagination. Its development is one of the main ends of the divine education of life, with all its efforts and experiences. One of the main ends of the divine education of life. Therefore, the first and essential means for its culture must be an ordering of our life towards harmony with its ideal in the mind of God. As he that is willing to do the will of the Father shall know of the doctrine, so we doubt not, he that will do the will of the poet shall behold the beautiful. For all is God's, and the man who is growing into harmony with his will is growing into harmony with himself. All the hidden glories of his being are coming out into the light of humble consciousness, so that at the last he shall be a pure microcosm, faithfully reflecting, after his manner, the mighty macrocosm. We believe, therefore, that nothing will do so much for the intellect or the imagination as being good. That's pretty simple. We do not mean after any formula or any creed, but simply after the faith of him who did the will of his Father in heaven. Yeah. So there's quite a bit there, actually.
Yeah.
It's being good.
More harmony.
So now he's talking about culturing your imagination, which he was, hinting at when he was talking about the young lady who, remember, either you go out to worship or you stay home to be sensual. From the last one, Luke, we talked about that.
Yeah, I do.
And he also says, where is that now? Oh, I love this one.
Sorry,
about oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was reading another line.
Well, I was just thinking of that line in here. I can't find it right at the moment, but I could look for it. No, where he talks about not repressing the imagination, right?
You're just reminding me of movies right now.
It's just interesting in this paragraph how often the will is brought up yet again. But it's not this weird resonance of the corresponding wills between the will of the poet and the perception of the beautiful, or the will of the Son and the will of the Father.
Well, he has poet capitalized in that part of the thing, so I think he's talking about God, right? The maker. And this gets back to his whole idea of ex nihilo, God creating from nothing, right? But I just wanted to read this one little sentence here where he says, "Seek not that your sons and daughters should not see visions, should not dream dreams. Seek that they should see true visions, that they should dream noble dreams. Such outgoing of the imagination is one with aspiration and will do more to elevate above what is low and vile than all possible inculcations of morality." And that's in the part of the essay where he talks about those people who, through their dogmatism, repress imagination in their children, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes into the explanation of what happens when people repress their imagination, which is another volition of the will, right? Because he uses Lady Macbeth as the example, where she wills away from her imagination. Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment does the same thing. He rationalizes murdering the woman, right? And then in the end, the imagination, which is the voice of God for MacDonald, comes back to haunt these people and drives them mad, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can't will away the voice of God, the divine imagination, right? The noble.
I guess you can be in disharmony with it.
That would be it. Yeah, that would be it, actually. The
And
disharmony.
that would be about it. It's almost like that Wendell Berry quote, "There are no unsacred places. There's only sacred places and desecrated places." And there is no escaping the imagination of God, but there's a way in which you can harmonize with it.
Well, that's what he says later, right? After the poet thing, the poet shall behold the beautiful. He says, "For all is God's," right? Which is what Wendell Berry's saying.
Mm-hmm.
All is God's, and the man who is growing into harmony with his will is growing into harmony with himself.
Mm-hmm.
All the hidden glories of his being are coming out into the light of humble consciousness, so that at the last he shall be a pure microcosm, faithfully reflecting after his manner the mighty macrocosm, which is on earth as it is in heaven. That's what that is. That's the reflection, right?
That's that concept of, which I love about what nous or image is so prevalent. And so the idea is that it's veiled, it's covered up, right? It's not destroyed, it's not depraved, it's none of that. It's just been veiled. And as you start peeling back that veiling, like when you start, and this is all this imaging, this imagination is effectively the microcosm, macrocosm. The more you do his will, the more that image starts to be revealed in you. You know what I mean? You start seeing that.
It's reflected back. It's reflected back, right? Like it, and yeah, I think this is why you find the mirror so often in George's writings, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's a reflection, the macro microcosm, right, on earth as it is in heaven. I mean, even St. Paul, when he says, "Though we see through a glass darkly," that's a mirror, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Some profound stuff.
Yeah,
it is.
Well, and it says it's being good because you have to do. So there's this simple thing, cliche in AA is just do the next right thing. Okay. Thy will not, it's thy will not mine be done. Those are kind of like really hallmarks. And so we seek to just do the power to carry out his will, right? That's kind of the mission, is just seek God, and we want to seek to do the will. That's the core of what happens in like 12 steps. Mm-hmm. And so when we can do the next right thing, that's all harmony. Like that's all that gets you there, and it gets to the point to where, and we can get this, and I think we always think there's pros, cons, choices. No, when you get to a place, you know the thing to do. Now, whether you will do it or not is a different story.
Mhm.
You don't have to pro or con. You know
But
the
as
right
soon as you don't do it, you know that you have stepped into disharmony.
exactly.
Yeah.
There's a price to be paid for it, right?
Mhm.
And that doing that thing might expose you to death,
Hmm.
but it's the next right thing,
Mhm,
you
mhm.
know.
Mhm.
So I like that the being that he's tying it into, which is, I know we get so much more into the thinking or the believing, or we can get these silly faith alone sort of things there, and truly God. It's this, George is clearly saying it's all about God, right? Where no one's saying that, but we have to participate in the synergia, the symphony. Like we play our role, like we are in the symphony with him,
Right.
and we're
Mm.
called into to focus on what is right, what is good, what is noble, what is pure, you know, those sorts of things. As he was saying that stuff was all just rushing at me out of that
Mhm.
paragraph there.
You know, when my kids were growing up, this is just reminding me, you know, they were getting to their teenage years and they'd be, you know, is it okay if we go to Till Lake, you know? And Till Lake was like code for all night parties in a forestry campsite, right? And I knew that, and I would say, sure, just, you know, and they'd be leaving and I'd say, bye, have fun, do the right thing. That's all I ever said to them.
Mhm.
Because what else can you say? You know, I didn't want to see them head out the door and say, don't do this. And you know what I mean?
Mhm.
I wanted to give them, I wanted to empower them
Yeah.
to do something good. Right. And that's what he talks about here when he says, we believe, therefore, that nothing will do so much for the intellect or the imagination as being good.
Good. Mm-hmm.
Right. It's like, yeah.
And we do not mean after any formula or any creed,
Mhm.
simply of the faith in him, right? Just
Yep.
Which is those steps that you're saying, like the next step is the right thing, you know? And that also for me provokes the image of being oriented towards God, right? Towards being able to see that image that he talks about before, where you have this reflection of the macro microcosm, right? And you're moving towards that image. So yeah. And that's why each step in that direction will be the right thing, actually.
and we
Even
have
if
to practice.
yeah.
We have to practice like kids to walk, like that's why the practices, the
Mhm.
praxis, like we have to do the things, like we have
You-
to practice these things, because if you're okay, you're stuck in a conundrum and you've got to make a decision sometimes, and sometimes life's decisions you have to make quickly.
Yeah.
There are times where life and death, like, and if I'm sitting there thinking, oh well, God is the Trinity and the Son is what the Father is what the Son, and you're not thinking about any of that stuff. you know, no, it's right here. It's the next
Yeah.
right thing, and you know.
You should read this next paragraph because it's exactly what you're talking about.
Okay. But if we speak of direct means for the culture of the imagination, the whole is comprised in two words: food and exercise. If you want strong arms, take animal food and row. Feed your imagination with food convenient for it and exercise it not in the contortions of the acrobat, but in the movements of the gymnast. And first for the food. And then he goes on, do you want me to read about Goethe?
Yeah, I would love.
Goethe has told us that the way to develop the aesthetic faculty is to have constantly before our eyes, that is, in the room we most frequent, some work of the best attainable art. This will teach us to refuse the evil and choose the good. It will plant itself in our minds and become our counselor. Involuntarily, unconsciously, we shall compare with its perfection everything that comes before us, for judgment.
Mm.
Now, although no better advice could be given, it involves one danger, that of narrowness, and not easily in dread of this danger would one change his tutor and so procure variety of instruction. But in the culture of the imagination, books, although not the only, are the readiest means of supplying the food convenient for it, and 100 books may be had where even one work of art of the right sort is unattainable. Seeing such must be of some size as well as of thorough excellence, and in variety alone is safety from the danger of the convenient food becoming the inconvenient model.
Hmm.
Variety alone is safety from the danger of the convenient food becoming the inconvenient model. Yeah. Now he's getting really practical.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because when I read that,
Yeah.
I thought of Jordan Peterson saying, beautify your surroundings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Find beautiful art and hang it up in your house, and surround yourself with good art. It's essentially what Goethe has said.
Yeah.
What is he saying in a work of art? What's the difference between an attainable work of art and a not attainable work of art, I guess?
I think he just meant for yourself. That's how I read it, like one that you can afford.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm reading it too practically.
No, that's
I think so. I think so. I think that's exactly right, Jason.
I was probably reading way too deep into it.
Yeah, you're like, I want that unattainable art on my wall.
Well, I'm not super smart, so that's okay. Sometimes you can read it wrong. I was just thinking sometimes certain art, there's a beyondness and an unattainability about it. Like it says so much that you could. So I was wondering if it was like something that's really beautiful that you can really contemplate and ruminate and for a long time, and it has levels so I didn't know if it meant that. At least that's what I was thinking when I heard that. But maybe he was meaning like, because it is very practical in there, Sherry. Like maybe he was meaning like you couldn't obtain that kind of art with,
It's possible, but I think Jason kind of nailed it. I think.
Well,
I mean, I would think any form of good art, I would think, is in a way somewhat unattainable, like you're talking about, like unattainable as in plumbing the depths of it. If it's like a true creative work, I think then it's open subject to like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's multi-valent.
levels. Yeah, levels of interpretation. So I think almost any form of art could be that way. But the way I read this was just like, if you're kind of talking like to poor people, like get the best work you can afford. Like maybe affordable was how I was reading attainable instead. I don't know, but I don't know. But I do like where you guys are taking it.
Yeah. Oswald asked in the comments here, Grill Country, do you think Goethe would find Peterson's native Canadian paintings kosher feng shui?
Have to ask Goethe, Oswald.
I have a question because two things are continually coming to my mind when we were talking about the whole harmony thing and kind of having this ideal or transcendent imagination and God's will and trying to be aligned with God's will and just doing the next right thing. So what coming to my mind was the movie The Green Knight and the book Phantastes, because they both feel similar in that way, that they're both kind of called out into nature and they're just kind of aimlessly wandering. And in both stories, it doesn't seem like either of them know what the next right thing to do is, or the next thing to do at all. And it just seems, but it's incredibly like how we ended this last paragraph. I mean, it's a book, and this book actually baptized C.S. Lewis' imagination. I would say probably baptized my imagination as well. Just reading this book, where you have this character who's seemingly aimless and not even sure what the next right thing to do is. And so I'm not sure what to do with that. I don't know why I bring that up. I didn't know if you guys had thoughts on that.
Anybody?
I don't know.
That's why you have to live it. Like when Sherry says you have to live into it, you have to live it. Like they still had to press forward. Like even when you don't know what to do, like even in the Green Knight or whatever, like you still press forward.
Yeah,
You just
that's
don't
true.
stay there. You don't stay there paralyzed, and you just
Yeah.
go out into the danger or the whatever, and
Mhm.
you'll find your way. And in each one of those, there's a moment where the next right thing becomes obvious, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah,
crucible
that's good.
moment. So it's just like you've just gotta, like you can sit in paralysis or, you know, get busy living or get busy dying. You know, you sometimes you just got like a lot of times as you'll find out as you guys get older and really hard things happen. Sometimes you just need to get up and move and do. You just have to.
Yeah.
Like that's just
Yeah.
the order of the day.
Yeah.
That's good. It's really good.
Yeah, even if you don't know where you're going.
I think that's why. I mean, I appreciate you saying that. I think that's why that I find that book so relatable too, is because I, like with my older sister, she's always been like that, where she'll have a vision. Like she started this ministry now with helping kids, and she could probably envision the next 20 years of her life and see a goal that she wants to aim at and go towards. And I'm like, I'm not that way. Like I'm lucky if I get the next step in front of me. It seems like, yeah. I mean, that's like how it feels for me. And so when I read Fantastes, it's like, yeah, he's just doing, and he almost like doesn't know what he's doing, where he's going, but he's still striving for something
You're still
good.
moving.
And
Yeah.
and even all the bad things that happen to him end up working out the good because his heart is like aligned rightly or something. And even though he probably shouldn't go left, he goes left anyway or something. And just I don't know. And something about that, yeah, about everything you said and about that book, I find it incredibly compelling and helpful in my own life, I guess.
Mhm.
Well, and Sherry, you keep talking about, I mean, there's the next right thing, but whether you go right or you go left, it's gonna be okay because you're in the labyrinth, like you're gonna run into
Yeah.
God anyway. Just go.
There's only one way in and one way out. Right. Yeah.
And death, and by the way, death is,
Yeah.
is where we're heading.
Yeah.
Come hell or high water.
Well, that's so weird when you're talking about resonance and like the womb being the place of like supreme resonance and entering death as a kind of,
Yeah.
if the grave becomes a womb
Yeah.
of sorts, you know, like
That's
that
why I
is,
said walk barefoot.
yeah, there's like a,
Well, I
a
just,
resonance that occurs.
I'm thinking about the Hidden Life poem because it's just, fermenting in my brain. And I just wanted to read this little thing because I think it speaks to what we just talked about now. He says, 3 sliding years with slowly blended change drew round their winter, summer, autumn, spring, fulfilled of work by hands and brain and heart. He labored as before, though when he would, and nature urged not, he with privilege would spare from hours of toil, read in his room, or wander through the moorland to the hills. There on the apex of the world would stand as on an altar, burning, soul and heart, himself the sacrifice of faith and prayer. Gaze in the face of the inviting blue that domed him round, ask why it should be blue, pray yet again, and with love strengthened heart, go down to lower things with lofty cares. That's just what we talk,
That's
Mhm.
good.
right?
I love that line. He asked why it should be blue.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I love that. So
He
good.
gaze in the face of the inviting blue that domed him round, ask why it should be blue, pray again, and with love strengthened heart go down to lower things with lofty cares. Right. And
Yeah.
that, like Jason, you were saying, your sister has all these, she can envision the next 20 years or whatever, right? This is why I read A Hidden Life, because I know that life. I get up in the morning, I have my coffee, I read my emails, I go do my chores, I come in, I work with my wool, or I vacuum. Like there's nothing grandiose about my life, okay? Nothing. It isn't great. I mean, great as in, it's boring. It's not interesting,
Mundane.
right?
Yeah.
But the whole time that my hands are working, like he says here, fulfilled of work by hands and brain and heart. Those things are all engaged together, And he talks about it a few times in the Hidden Life poem where, while he's laboring, he's putting together, his imagination is working out the things of God, right? So anyway, I just wanted to share that because I thought it was great.
What I think about with this quote from the Hidden Life that you bring up, and this is how I envision something like the way up is the way down. Like
yeah,
this is
good.
It's very much this. I'm not thinking of it in these really abstract ways. I'm thinking of like this into life, into the mundane, I guess.
Yeah.
I know that probably sounds simple because you'd think like that statement would mean so much more than that, but no, I don't think it really does.
No, and this is George MacDonald does talk about the simplicity of God, right? Like I have my favorite quote here. Let me see. I'm going to find it now.
Conforming your will to the will of God is attending to the least of these. Like, so you're looking for the next step forward, what to do next. It's like it's literally right in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like
No creed is going to spell it out.
This quote here is to me the perfect articulation of the simplicity of God, the singular simpleness of God. Nothing is inexorable but love which will yield to prayer. Love which will yield to prayer is imperfect and poor. Nor is it then that then the love that yields, but its alloy. For if at the voice of entreaty love conquers displeasure, it is love asserting itself, not love yielding its claims. It is not love that grants a boon unwillingly. Still less is it love that answers a prayer to the wrong and hurt of him who prays it. Love is one, and love is changeless, for love loves unto purity. Love has ever in view the absolute loveliness of that which it beholds. Where loveliness is incomplete, and love cannot love its fill of loving, it spends itself to make more lovely, that it may love more. It strives for perfection, even that itself may be perfected, not in itself, but in the object. As it was love that first created humanity, so even human love, in proportion to its divinity, will go on creating the beautiful for its own outpouring. There is nothing eternal but that which loves and can be loved, and love is ever climbing towards the consummation when such shall be the universe, imperishable, divine. Therefore, all that is not beautiful in the beloved, all that comes between and is not of love's kind, must be destroyed. And, you know, like when I remember reading that ages ago and thinking, yeah, it reminded me of a movie I saw with Brendan Fraser and, oh, now I can't remember the name of the movie. It's the one where his parents think that there's an atomic bomb, and they go into their bomb shelter for 30
Yeah.
years, and, you know, and he's telling, you know, he's trying, so he's got his son, you know, and they're showing the different stages of this kid's development, right? He's born in this bomb shelter, and he grows up in it. And you know, he's a little kid, and then he's a teenager, and then he's a man, you know, and they're talking about baseball. And he's like, but what, Dad, why does he have to go to second base? And his father says, because he must. Right? That's his only answer. Because he must. And when I read this about love, I thought, you know, why does God do the things he does? Why does he destroy the thing that comes between love that is not of love's kind? Why does he love unto purity? Why does he have ever in view the absolute loveliness of that which it beholds, and where it's incomplete and it can't fill it, love its fill of loving? It spends itself. Why does it spend itself? Because it must. Because it's love. And that's what love does. Right? That's the only reason. There's no other reason.
Yeah.
There we go. Got that
That was
off my
good.
chest.
Yeah, that was good.
And
We're
that's
just
the
letting it
will of the
flow.
and that's the will of the Father.
Yeah.
Because when you think, one of the things that's, you know, I've come to realize, or whatever, is like, whether you take this job or that job, or whether you do this thing or that thing, or God doesn't really care about any of that. He cares about who you are, no matter where you're at. Like, you want to be a doctor, great. You want to be a carpenter, great. You want to, okay, whatever. No pro cons list here. Whatever you want to do, what do you do? And then while you're there, what I've really struggled with my whole life, because I have a million things going off at once. I've got all these strands here, and I'm over here, and I can literally think about the past and the future at the same time. I'm one of those wacky guys that has like all these things going on at once. And like when you talk about one of the things that you are, though, Sherry, in your day, is your style of life has allowed you to be present.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
that's all that exists. There's an attention, right? This present. And you know, don't worry about yesterday or tomorrow. Be here right now, 24 hours in this moment. Like, what can you do? Because you will have moments, and you think about all the times, like, I think the regrets are, when we will look at it, will be, where were all those times in a day?
Yeah.
Where I missed the opportunity.
Oh my God.
For a kindness to my child, to that simple, kind word to my wife, to, if it's a worker, or it's a this, or it's a that, or it's the person here, or it's all those times I could have just, going about my day, been attentive to loving something into the lovingness. And instead I got a bunch of things to do. I'm an important person, and I got to do this and what, you know, all that. I'm sorry, I'm going to cuss, all that bullshit. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is why I love the Hidden Life poem so much, because it's the mundane, right? You know, he gets up, he gets dressed, he harnesses up the horses, he goes out in the field, he plows, he has to bring in the harvest in, you know, in a thunderstorm. He doesn't feel like it, you know, he has all the feelings that we all have about the things that we have to do. You know, like I used to tell my kids, or my kids used to say to me when they were little, I can't wait till I grow up so I can do whatever I want. And I'm like, okay. How's it working out for you? That's what I say. That's what I say to them now. Right. But I have to read another portion of this poem, because this is one of my favorite parts. He says, when from great cities came the old sad news of crime and wretchedness, and children sore with hunger and neglect and cruel blows, He would walk sadly all the afternoon, with head down bent and pondering, footsteps slow, arriving ever at the same result, concluding ever, the best that I can do for the great world is the same best I can do for this, my world. What truth may be therein will pass beyond my narrow circumstance in truth's own right. And the reason I'm reading this is because this is what we talked about from the very beginning, Jason, about, bringing it down to the lowliest common sense, or the lofty representations being, in this downward motion, right? A philanthropist said pompously, "It is not for your gifts to spend themselves on common labors like this. You owe the world far nobler things." He answered him, "The world is in God's hands. This part of it in mine." I love that line. My sacred past, with all its loves inherited, has led here. Here has left me. Shall I judge? Arrogant, primeval godlike work in earth and air, seed time and harvest offered fellowship with God and nature, unworthy of my hands? I know your argument. I know with grief. The crowds of men in whom a starving soul cries through the windows of their hollow eyes for bare humanity, no room to grow. Would I could help them, but all crowds are made of individuals. And their grief and pain, their thirst and hunger, all are of the one, not of the many. The true, the saving power enters the individual door, and thence issues again in 1,000 influences besieging other doors. That's another favorite portion of this poem for me. The true, the saving power enters the individual door. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. Right? And we all know the classic picture of Jesus standing at the door, and it enters the individual door, and from there it issues again in 1,000 influences, and we have no idea what they are. We don't know the ripple effect that we make in the world, right? Mm-hmm. I cannot throw a mass of good into the general midst, whereof each man may seize his private share, and if one could, it were of the lowest kind, not reaching to that hunger of the soul. Now here I labor, whole, in the same spot where they have known me from my childhood up, and I know them, each individual. If there is power in me to help my own, even of itself it flows beyond my will, takes shape in commonest of common acts, meets every humble day's necessity. I would not always consciously do good, not always work from full intent of help, unless I forget the measure heaped and pressed and running over, which they pour for me, and never reap the too much of return in smiling trust and beams from kindly eyes. But in the city, with a few lame words and a few wretched coins, sore coveted, to mediate between my cannot and my would, my best attempts would never strike a root. My scattered corn would turn to wind-blown chaff. I would grow weak. I might even weary of my own kind. Misunderstood the most, were almost known, baffled and beaten by their unbelief. I've never heard such a coherent argument for a hidden life. And the reason I think that it's so powerful is because it's based on gratitude and humility. Mm. Right? That's where it's coming from.
That's good.
And he's not reaching beyond, like he says further down here, he says, leave the thing that nearest lies and choose the thing far off. That act has no touch of God in it, who seeks the needy for the pure need's sake. Must straightway die, choked in its selfishness. So anyway, I just thought since we're talking about lofty representations being brought down to the commonest, you know, cliche, you know, the on earth as it is in heaven, the sacred and the mundane, they're all the same thing, right? And it is literally putting one foot in front of the other in a right orientation towards God,
Yeah.
right? Seeking with the imagination, right? The duty of the imagination is to work out the things of God. And then you don't know, you know, that saving power enters the individual door and then besieges 1,000 other doors, right? Thousands of doors.
I like that part. I
And you
love that
have to
part.
just trust, right? You trust God for your life and for the life of the world. And, you know, this is exactly what monastics are doing, actually. And I think, you know,
Is
like I
this
talked to
the
Paul Kingsnorth
ascesis?
about this. Yeah, ascetic life, right? And so it's like that is to me asceticism. You don't have to go crazy. You don't have to go crazy. You
Yeah.
actually have to go, you have to humble yourself and be and do it right here, right now, right?
Mhm.
Well, that's like you called, like, that's Eucharistic living.
Mm.
It's because Eucharisto, Thanksgiving, it's a gratitude.
Yes.
It's that response, right?
Yeah.
And the thing that I like about the simplicity of the Eucharist is it says your own from your own. Like, this is God's, so this is your own, but from your own. It's like we've transformed grain and grapes into these things of life, bread and wine,
Mm.
simple things, right? Are offered up, and then the infinite, the beyond comes in, and it is
Yeah.
it's fully God, it's fully man, but it's in this simple thing. And I will tell you that when you do that, it helps you to have some imagine. It doesn't help you to get the full experience of a liturgy. You need to bring your imagination.
Yeah.
Because there are moments where I have found myself, there are angels, there are saints, we are portals, we are there. You're lifting up in one voice and you hear, like, we're singing, so there's these harmonies, you know, you have this stuff, but these are simple acts. Like, you get up, I like how Father Schmemann talks about it for the life of the world. He says it starts when you get up and get ready and you walk, or you go to church. You start those are simple. I get up, I brush my teeth, I take a shower, I put on clothes, I go, the things of life, and we're ascending up into heaven. You're on this ascension.
Yep.
And you're literally going up into this throne room, and you can go and just say, you can go and say some dead prayers if you don't have imagination when you are in the temple. But if you have imagination, focusing on what is right, what is good, what is pure, when the icons become portals and you're being brought into them, that's the perspective. It's taking you into them. It's not bringing them out to you in 3D. It's not a statue, right? I hate to put all that into that imagery or whatever, but I just spent Holy Week, like, lots of services and stuff, but I just love it. But it is like but it's all a movement of thanksgiving, of simple things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone can do it. You do not have to be a super smart person to go in and participate in those things. In fact, you're probably better off if you go in and you're just a little simple.
Amen.
That's good.
Well, and Sharon, I think how to live this out, I think we can organize our lives, and it doesn't mean we have to move out like Sherry and literally go to the bush. I have
No, this
friends
is
of
why.
mine. I have friends of mine that live in cities, but they've organized their lives in ways so they can homeschool, so they're around their kids. Like now they don't have things that other people have, stuff, but you can organize your life in a way so you can slow down, you can attend, you can be, you can like you can
That's
make
why
that
I
choice.
said. That's why I was saying, and talking about Frankel in the Kingsnorth conversation, right? Because it's about attitude. I mean, seriously, if Frankel can encourage people to live and live as free human beings in a concentration camp, then what are we worried about here? What's our problem? Right? Like, what is our problem?
Mhm.
We're not considering throwing ourselves up against an electric fence, hopefully, right? Because
Yeah.
we don't want to be, murdered by someone else.
Well, yeah.
Sherry, was there a thing in there where he talked about? I thought I heard something that was like, you couldn't solve these issues with money or coins. Like that's not the point. And then because like I've always done this experiment. Like if people say, "Oh, I'm going to make a lot of money and do good for people," well, like actually, if you have a few $100 million and you divide it by 50,000, how many people could you really? I mean, like literally, money doesn't infinite, like massive amounts of money doesn't solve problems for people. Like you're really not doing like that's this big lie. Like, oh, I'm going to get rich and help all these people. Like, was it more important for George MacDonald to sit down and write Lilith? So Jason is sitting here in the year whenever you read that, right?
This is more important.
Yeah.
That book was a lifesaver. Well, not Fantasties was a lifesaver to me, I think.
Yeah.
It was, yeah. I can only imagine how much it was to other people too.
Well, just think, I mean, it alone baptized C.S. Lewis's imagination.
Yeah, and that's
Take it
the
from there.
door opening the infinite
The
number of doors
beseeching
we
of
can
the
talk.
yeah, exactly. What were you going to say earlier, Jason? You were going to say something there.
Oh, well, it's kind of sideways related. It was and it probably won't relate that well, but I don't know if any of you guys have seen the movie, The Banshees of Inisherin.
I haven't seen that
It
yet.
came out last.
I haven't
Oh,
yet.
you got to
I want
watch it.
to.
I got to watch it.
It's
Yeah, I
good.
really want to watch it.
It's really good. It felt extremely related to what you were talking about a little bit ago about just kind of doing the most common thing, but it puts with the tension of like kind of being present and trying to do great things as well. It's got that in there, but it's a really good movie. I'm not going to say any more though because I don't want to spoil it. But that's
so all of this, these deep convictions that I have, and you can tell just by the way I'm talking about them, because I can even I'm trying to rein in my passion here. I don't know if you can tell, but
no, let us have it.
I don't
Don't
want to
hold back.
overwhelm people with it, but it comes from a place of having this kind of arrogance that he talks about. So, I was in Bible school and I was going to be a missionary and I was going to do all this good stuff for God, and and I didn't care how I did it. Like if I had to step on other people's faces to get there, then I was that was part of the plan, okay? And so I was sitting in a class one day and one of the lecturers said, how many of you here want to be missionaries? Right? And then he goes, what if God calls you to be a parent? And I was like, wait a minute, he's not going to do that. That's stupid. Right? Meanwhile, I was a parent at the time. I was a single mom, and I remember going home and thinking, okay, well, he did call me to be a parent because I am one. Right?
Wow.
And then I started to ruminate on this, and I started realizing, oh, this is my gift. My child is my gift. And my gift to my child is to raise them so that when I say do the right thing, they can put the foot in front of the other one and move towards God. And then and those influences will besiege the 1,000 other doors, right?
Mhm.
And I thought,
To
oh,
their- yeah, the reverberations to their kids and their kids.
it's
Like
never
I think,
ending. It's never ending,
like,
right? And then
you
and then
know,
and then all of a sudden my motherhood, the situation I found myself in as a single mom, okay? You know, a little sinner saved by grace. Suddenly took on this calling, you know, and my imagination was raised up to dream nobler dreams, right? And I was no longer the foolish girl who wanted to stay home and be sensual, but who went out to worship. That's what George talks about, right? That now
Mhm.
my life was one that goes out to worship. And every morning I said to my children, I'm going to cry. Sorry. Every morning I said to my children, good morning, children of God. Because I had to remind myself, right? I had to remind myself that this was my calling and that they were my gift. And that it was noble.
Mhm.
Sorry about that, guys.
Don't
Nothing worse than a
Don't
woman in a room
apologize.
full of men crying.
Don't apologize.
Talk about awkward.
I'm trying not to
saying-
cry.
Yeah, I'm doing the
This
same
is one of
thing.
the, yeah, just like had
I was
something got
balling
in my eye.
earlier tonight. It's all good.
You already
Those are the
got-
good days.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not
laugh a little,
crying.
cry a little. Yeah.
It's just been
Yeah,
raining
and
on my face.
and you know, honestly, you guys, if this is how you live, the world is enchanted.
Yeah.
It is. It just is. It there's no effort. You don't have to make it happen. You don't have to imagine, you know.
Because there is no curse.
Mhm. That's right.
The curse is a gift.
Mhm.
Amen.
You know, my father used to belittle my mama quite a bit about she had no friends and she wasn't she didn't do things or whatever. But what my mom was a fantastic loving mother. And what my mother was a fantastic daughter and granddaughter. She was the one that sat at the hospitals when her mother had this awful hemorrhage in her spine and was a quadriplegic for the last, year of her life. And my mom was there every day, and my great grandmother. And I have a lot of cousins, and some of them had difficult lives, but she was a mother to them, right? And so she has this, on Christmas, when you talk to my cousins, like, she has this place because she was the unconditional love in our
And
family.
even in Fantastes, in the story of Fantastes, the grandmothers, right, Jason, are brought up by the fairy by the fairy woman in the very beginning, right? Like, she says, you know a lot about your grandfathers, but you don't know anything about your grandmothers.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
she, as you get to this space, and I've said this, and I've had some issues with my dad because, quite frankly, I got to a point where I spoke out and I had had enough. I'd had enough. And I said, I've had enough. The way you're treating her, you're treating everywhere else. I'd had enough. But, as I look at this, and I've been able to share this with her, but I mean this, the impact that her life has had on our family has been immense.
Mhm.
And it is not small, and it is not little. People will not know her name in some book somewhere or have this fame, but in the circle where it matters, she is beloved.
Mhm.
That's it. It's the whole of it, right?
And it's a hidden life. It's a hidden
Yeah.
life. Right.
Mhm.
This is the beauty of it, you know. Yeah.
That's right.
Well, I've had to learn that, Sherry. Like I had an experience and then I went to seminary and I had this sense of wanting to think like I had to do great things for God because I had this massive Holy Spirit, like I was given this gift or whatever. And, you know, I've had to come back and I've learned along the way, there's been a lot of humility, but I've come back to this place to where you were at, Sherry, right?
Mhm.
Like I'm doing all this writing right now and I'm doing this stuff. And I realized I'm not supposed to do it for anyone. I'm just supposed to do it for the sake of doing it.
Mhm.
Like I've been writing homilies and stuff, right? Because I was a pastor, there was a rhythm. And I'm not sharing it. Like I was going to put a blog out there. It's like, nope. And if it may just be something that I have that my kids and my grandkids might read someday, like what was dad doing in all those books all the time? And why was he going to church like crazy? Maybe I just leave a wealth of something for they would, what was Grandpa Cleaver like?
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, you know,
Mhm.
but I've had this real sense that I'm not supposed to go public. Maybe someday, I don't know, who knows? But my point is I'm supposed to do the work.
Mhm. Yeah, and the thing is, Lance, that it's making you,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
There's
Yeah.
this thing about doing any good that is within the sight of anyone. Like if it's, I don't want to say that any good that receives any sort of admiration is a bad thing, but it's very clear that maybe that's the reward in and of itself as the admiration. Like you've received a reward in full, you know, like what is it, scripture, or like Daniel being told to pray in privacy rather than in the public courtyard. You know, it's like those are just two scriptures that I don't even have the reference for that are bouncing around my head as you guys are
Mhm.
talking.
Mhm. Even Jesus says, if you know, if you're fasting, get up, wash your face. Don't look like you are.
Yeah.
Don't talk
Mhm.
about it. If you're, you know, if you pray, go in your closet and pray
Mhm.
alone, right? And
Live a simple life, mind your own business, work with your hands.
And he may call, and the point is, if it's his will, like if it's his will that there's something that's supposed to be done with this, like I
like
won't be able.
Jason's sister, for example,
Yeah.
you know, if God gives her the ability to, you know, make that vision that she has happen, she is the person to do it, right? Because
Mhm.
she has the capacity to do that, right?
Mhm.
And like we're not making any hard and fast statements here about how you're supposed to live your life. That's for sure.
100%. Because thank God George published books, right? That he didn't
Yeah.
hide those away. Like,
Yeah, no kidding.
and the other thing I think, Sherry, you'll get this. Like, if it's supposed to be, and they're supposed to be out somewhere, I will not be able to not do it. Like, if he wants them
Yeah.
out, they'll come out. Like,
Mhm.
he'll make it happen. Like, I know that's how it works. Like, it'll be, you
Mhm.
know, it'll just be something, but it'll be organic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Because yeah.
Organic.
It'd almost be more precious too, I would think. Yeah.
You got a thunderstorm going on out there?
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I took the headphones out for a second, because I can hear
I
the
just
thunder
saw a
and the
flash of
rain pouring
lightning
down.
behind you.
I love storms. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, me
That's one thing
too.
I miss about Florida. Is in Florida you would just get those crazy thunderstorms like once a day, and it was just fun.
Oh, nice.
Oh, speaking of my little sister, Melissa, well, I have two little sisters, but Melissa's the middle one. She got struck by lightning when she was a baby in
What?
Florida. Yeah, it was a crazy. Yeah, it like I remember the storm too, because I remember it just being this really, really bad thunderstorm, and my parents were gone, and this thunderstorm came in, and I was over I lived by my aunts and uncles. We were like neighbors. So I was at my uncle's house, and then my oldest sister Jessica was at our house, and I don't know if she was with anybody, but the storm came in. And Melissa was the one. She was just a baby, and she was asleep on my parents' bed. Well, just not like tiny baby, I guess, but infant, taking a nap. And they got home, and so the tree outside their bedroom was just split in half where lightning had hit it. And they went inside, and Melissa was just asleep on the bed. They ended up like I think the telephone that was plugged into the wall exploded, like nails blown out of the wall. They moved the bed, and underneath the bed, like the carpet was burnt, and underneath the carpet, the concrete cracked. She just slept right through it. And I'm like,
Wow.
it's like the coolest. She never tells that story too. I'm like, basically like Thor, the god of thunder. I mean, come on, you should tell that story all the time.
That's crazy.
Yeah, there were some bad storms and just thunderstorms in Florida. I miss them a lot, but you have the lightning out there that goes, all the way to the ground. It's like we don't get that as much here, but every once in a while we do.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, total side trail.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
no,
You know what's really encouraging for me, Sherry, is when I see like Luke and Jason, is the fact that you guys are already on this path and contemplating these things at this young of an age. Like you guys have such an advantage.
Yeah.
Over, but our journeys are our journeys, or our pathways are our pathways. But I just look like, when I look at the two of you, I'm just like, oh, they're in good shape.
Mm-hmm.
They're asking the right questions, and they're seeking the right things, and
Mm-hmm. Yep. Totally.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it took me too long to get here. I always feel like I wasted too much time, which is probably a blessing. So I guess you get to kick.
Well, I'm at the age now, Jason, where I can't even think. I can't even imagine. Like I can't even seriously consider reading all the books that I'd like to read. I don't even have much time. I don't even have enough time for that. Talk about feeling like you wasted time.
Like,
and I have to say to myself, it is what it is. It is what it is. My life has been what it was, and it is what it is. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And if not for medical technology, I wouldn't even be sitting here right now. I'd be dead.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been cut short, Same with my husband.
yeah.
He would have died, and then 2 years later, I would have died. And that would have been the end of us. Just like that.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I often say to people, because people get so hung up on, the grandiose things, right? God, I got to do something for God. I got to do something amazing. And with my life, I'm wasting my life. I'm, whatever. I mean, sure, some people are wasting their lives, but that's also part of their life, But for me, God made us, and then he breathed his life into us. It's his life that we're living.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then he said to us, go forth and multiply. He didn't say go forth and be missionaries. He didn't say go do something fantastic.
Yeah.
He said, go live. Right? And I often think about it in terms of my livestock, like I want my lambs to grow up to be sheep and healthy and act like sheep and enjoy their lives. And I want to see them bouncing around out there and getting frisky and having fun and bonking heads with each other and doing things sheep do and multiplying.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Chad talks about that with Legion, and what struck him is so Legion's, chained in the graveyard and everything, the demons and everything else. And then that happens, and Legion goes, Jesus, I want to come with you. I want to go on this adventure. Like whatever. He's like, no, stay here until the people hear what I did. So stay right in your, like you were talking about that poem, which is like No.
Yep.
Stay in your village. Stay right here. Just tell them what I did. And you mean I just need to stay in the same town where I was born and these same people out in the backwaters of Judea? And I can't go on an adventure. Nope. Stay here and tell them what I did for you.
Mhm.
Okay.
And they're the hardest audience to win over.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
yeah, you were the guy that was crazy chained in the
It's easy to talk to people you
the
don't know.
cemetery.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to talk to people you've never met.
Oh my gosh.
They, you know, they always think you're fantastic, right? They're like, "Oh,
Right.
that's fantastic."
Right.
Yeah.
You know, try talking to the people who know you. Oh, that's a different story.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Amen, sister.
Mhm.
hmm
Oh, look at the kitty. She loves
Yeah.
you unconditionally, Jason.
Oh,
Oh.
yeah, she does. She bit me, and then she started loving me after that. Yeah.
She just wanted to get a taste.
Yeah,
What's her
it's
name?
kind of my fault. Her name's Kit Kat.
No.
I didn't name her, but my mom named her. Yeah, she's nice. She's a nice cat. I like her. As cats go, she's very sweet.
Mm. I am fading out.
Yeah, yeah. I guess we should call it. We took a
I-
little bit of time at the beginning of the podcast to Jason and I just to talk and catch up and stuff, and
Yeah.
so we got started late. But I'm glad you got to make it, Luke.
I am looking forward to re-listening to this. There's so much good stuff shared here. Thank you.
Well, thanks
Yeah,
for
I
letting me
really
crash.
like
I
where
had
this
a,
went.
I'm glad you came, Lance.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
guys.
thank you for coming. Yeah,
Really,
I always
really
like
good.
when you can join.
it's a
Mhm.
rare
Really,
night.
really
Yeah.
good.
My wife is out with some lady friends that she's met online, got together in real life, and they're hanging out doing crafting and stuff this weekend.
Oh,
So I had
nice.
a free night. So thanks for letting me crash.
What are
No,
they
not
crafting?
even crashing. It was great.
Yeah.
Thanks for
What-
coming.
What are they? Do you mind if I ask what they're crafting?
There's this online dude. They do a lot of this Bible journaling and they crafting. So she has a number of kind of different groups that they do this stuff. But but it is. But I think this is the group of ladies that they're Christian gals or whatever. So they'll create these lots of different things, but like they'll sew things and they'll create these covers and then they cut out pieces of paper and then they make it pretty and they make pretty things and then they put Bible verses on it and then they journal.
I
So-
love that. I love that. I'm gonna end the broadcast, but you guys don't have to leave.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
anyway, hey,
All right.
good to see
Thank
you
you,
guys.
everybody.
Yeah.
Yep. See you, Lance. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Bye.